Sound matters. Be heard. Welcome to the podcast where you get exclusive behind-the-scenes tips to make your own show sound truly spectacular. This is Podtastic Audio.
Hey, what's happening? How are you doing today? How's your podcast coming along? Hopefully you got a podcast. Hey, maybe you don't, maybe you do. Hey, I'm here to help you out. I am Chris, and I am from the original Chris and Christine Show podcast. You can find out every single thing you want to know about that show on and over on the website, which is chrisandchristineshow.com. And I put a link to that and all my fun goodies right in the show notes of this episode. Go on below and you can find all kinds of fantastic stuff. Like if you do have a podcast and you're kind of wondering, well, is anybody listening to this thing or is it even any good? Well, don't you worry. You send it over to me and I will personally listen to it and I will send you an email back what my thoughts are on your podcast episode, your most recent episode to be exact. Now, the reason why I say send me your podcast so I can listen to the most recent episode is that with your recent episode, it should be your best episode that you just did. It's the most fresh. It's the most recent. It actually, if you log on to whether Apple or any of the podcast players, they always seem to filter the most recent podcast episode at the top. So that would be the one that I would listen to if I was tuning into your show for the very first time, would be the one sitting right at the top of the page. You push play on that one first, of course. Now, a link to that will be in the show notes of this episode under podcast review. You click that and you follow the simple instructions, and then I will be on my way to reviewing your podcast. I cannot wait to hear your show. So today here on Podtastic Audio, where I help you create and design your amazing podcast and make sure it sounds spectacular, better than the rest. That's one thing that a good podcast versus an amateur podcast, if you have really good audio, which really isn't that hard to get good audio, but let's just say you have really good audio for your podcast, it will make it sound and appear to the listener that this guy or girl has got the podcast really figured out. They sound professional, not just look professional, but actually sound professional. So today on Podtastic Audio, I'm going to talk a little bit about sound quality, why video for podcasting is very easy for pretty much anybody to do, and the one most important thing that every single podcaster needs to do for their show to become great. What is that? We'll find out. Here we go. Buckle up. Speaking of doing podcast reviews for people, I have got a lot of those like movie review type shows have been sending me their podcasts to go check out. And I do think that if you remember back in the days of 2020, the early days of the pandemic, when everybody was supposed to be locked down during quarantine, so all they really could do was eat snacks, watch Netflix, binge watch the latest Marvel movies, Star Wars, you name it. So basically, they were bored. They wanted to communicate with their friends and family that were basically home at their place. So they'd start a podcast and start talking and create things to talk about. So a lot of these podcasts, or should I say a lot of these movie, TV, pop culture, anything on the screen review type of podcasts emerged. And I know they probably were a lot of other podcasts that did TV and film, movie review shows. I call these all like the review show type of shows, really. And I think the reason why they became so popular was because you're already at home watching the movie or watching the TV show. You're already watching it. So what you and your friends do is you create a podcast where you just discuss the thing you were already talking about. Now, when it comes to doing the podcast reviews like I've been doing lately, I've got quite a few of them that came in that were those type of shows. And as I listen back to them, they all start to sound exactly the same. They talk about a movie. They break down the different plot points. They may even go deep and talk about the different actors and different character choices and maybe the director and all that great stuff. But basically, They give their opinion, and the opinion is almost identical from host to host. So it got me thinking that's not very entertaining, at least to me, anyways. So my suggestions were basically like this is that if two people on the podcast, two hosts, for example, have the exact same opinion on the topic you guys are talking about, then one of you does not need to be there because it's like, hey, Joe, I thought that movie was great. I thought it was great too. Do you like the scene where this thing happened? Oh, I love that scene where that thing happened. What do you think about that person? Was he great? Oh, I love that person. He was great too. Oh, what are your thoughts on the movie, Joe? I thought it was great. Oh, you liked it too? Come on, man. A great podcast is going to have multiple personalities with different opinions on the topic. That is a key ingredient for a great show. Like I said, if two people have the exact same opinion, then one of them does not need to be there. Each person should have their own thoughts and opinions about the subject matter. Now, I know that if you're doing a movie review podcast, which is extremely easy to do because all you have to do is watch the movie and talk about it, which you're already going to do anyways. There's not much research other than watching the movie. And chances are you already watched it or you are going to watch it. So, but I know that it's a very popular topic. It's a very popular niche, I guess, movie review podcast. It's just that they're very hard to be extremely successful, I think. So another suggestion I have for you if you are doing the movie style podcast is to have some creative and very clever like ranking system that you tease at the beginning of your podcast episode. So it's like, hey, we're reviewing this movie. Joe and I, let us discuss, and our ranking systems are this, this, and this, and find out where this movie ranks at the end of this episode. So kind of giving an idea and a tease to the listener to kind of hang in longer to the very end to see what you guys are talking about. Because if you have some really creative, like a ranking system, like maybe this movie was a great movie to be on a first date with, or maybe this movie was so bad, I'd rather, I don't know, wash my eyes out with acid. I don't know, something like that. Some kind of crazy system and have a ranking system and post that maybe on social media, things of that sort. It makes it more fun for the listener to kind of tag along because I want to know what happens at the very end of the episode. Other than the fact you say it was a great show or a great movie, yeah, that's great. But you got to be more than that. And you have to have some energy. You have to have some different opinions on the actual topic. Because if you're just talking about a movie and you're saying how great it was, it's kind of boring to listen to. You see, a podcast listener wants to end the episode and get some kind of value from listening your podcast episode. So basically, if your show delivers no value at all, there's nothing in it for the listener wants to push play and say, what is in this for me? Am I going to have fun? Am I going to learn something? Am I going to find out new things? Something for them. So before I tell you the one thing that every single podcaster needs to put into every single show, I'm going to say is that when it comes to podcasting, there is the audio and there's the video. There are people who love audio and there's people who love video. But for some reason, the world has never seemed to cross. You know, it's like you love the video stuff and you focus on video a lot and you do the whole video thing. And you might have some decent audio, yeah. But then you get the guys that are the audio only, and their audio usually, for the most part, is pretty spectacular. Now, audio is easier to do than video, but not always, because if you were to ask somebody today, hey, let's record a podcast episode right here, right now with our smartphones. Let's do it. So what do you think would be the app of choice to record this podcast from a smartphone from somebody that's never really recorded a podcast before? Yeah, that's right. They would pull out the camera app and they would record the video because the video gets video and audio because it is probably the easiest thing to do if you're going to record something on a smartphone. If you don't know any other thing, if you told a guy, hey, we're going to do this podcast, but I need you to record the audio of it, they still probably pull the camera out because I said, hey, do you have a way to record audio only? They would look at their phone and be like, oh, I don't know how to even do that. Is there a microphone thing? Flipping through the different apps. Like, I got this notes recorder thing. I don't know. Does that work? Or can I just do it with the camera? Because that always works. It records the video and the audio and get it all. It's a very simple way to do that. And I can see why a lot of podcasters will lean on video when they do their podcast, at least start their podcast, because it's so simple and everybody knows how to use a camera phone and everybody knows how to record video with their smartphone. I bet you that most people can do recording on their video on their phone versus recording audio only on their phone. So, assuming you recorded your show with your camera and you have the whole video file, now the trick is, how do you get that to your computer? Now, if you're an Apple guy like me, you can easily do an AirDrop and send it right on over, plug your phone in. Maybe you can upload it to some Dropbox or something and export the files that way. I know if you have a Google account like Google Photos, you might be able to drop it over there, drop it into your drive, and then from there, download it to your computer. Now, depending on what DAW, digital audio workstation software you use, you can take that video file and drop it right in there and then get the audio track and strip it out of the video. So you're taking the video part, throwing it away, and keeping the audio only part to work on for your podcast. And yes, it makes it very easy. And yes, you can do a podcast that way. Will it sound good? Probably not. Not as good as a microphone, not as good as a console, not as good as this Rodecaster here I'm talking into. But if you have to do it that way, I guess you could. You got to do what you got to do. Now, if you are good with sound editing, you might be able to enhance some of that stuff, make it sound decent. I know if you run it through Descript's studio sound, it definitely will make it sound much, much better. But don't forget, you're recording it with the camera on the phone, like a video would, right? So you got to deal with that stuff. And when it comes to video versus audio, one thing I have personally noticed is that those who record either Zoom shows, the StreamYard shows, or whatever, any kind of like video first content, is that the audio seems to be taking a back seat as far as their production goes. They're all about the video. Like, I want the camera to look great. I want the backdrop to look great. I want my hair to look great. I want to look great. And then the audio is usually subpar because they're recording it with like ear pods, or the microphone is 4 feet from their mouth because, they don't want to get it in the camera shot. Heaven forbid the microphone is in the camera shot of this podcast. So the audio has that real echo sound, very distant sound to the podcast. Listen, the closer you get to your microphone, the less echo you're going to get, less reverb on your microphone. That's all it really takes to do that. In fact, this room in right now, Echo City, I'm going to tell you, it's got tile floors, wooden desk, it's got wall. It's not like designed for podcasting at all, but here we are, and it sounds great because I'm talking close to the microphone. That's basically what you got to do. So anyways, what I'm saying is that when people have a video podcast and they do a video style first, they seem to neglect the audio stuff because they're looking at things and they're paying attention to things and they got the distraction of the video. Now, I do think when you watch video clips back on like TikTok or Instagram Reels or any of those short form video type platforms, we usually are pretty forgiving to bad audio as long as you got an image you're looking at on the screen. Now, when it comes to long form, like a whole hour YouTube video, if you do the whole thing, it's on YouTube and you're watching the entire thing, then I think the audio starts to drone out some of the video. So if you have really good video but really poor audio, I don't think anyone's going to hang for that entire 1 hour session that you record. I just don't think they're going to do that. Now, it's not like I completely hate doing video for a podcast. I prefer audio. In fact, radio and audio and radio stations and music is something that I've been involved with my entire life. In fact, I grew up very, very poor, like really poor. Like we only had like one television and got like 2 channels. And I think one of the channels was just a fuzzy snow. I did not have cable. I didn't grow up on MTV. I didn't have any of that stuff. For me, I had the listen to the radio. That's all I really had was like radio and music. So I really fell in love with the audio and audio content. And of course, I commuted for work and I had to commute for school. And I eventually became a driver, starting out doing pizza delivery, way back in the day. Of course, when you're doing a pizza delivery, you listen to the radio a lot. I listen to a lot of talk shows, and this is way before XM radio. And this is way, way before podcasting was even invented. So I listened to a lot of stuff, and that's why I fell in love with audio and audio content, because I could physically be doing something else while I consume the content. And I loved the energy of the radio shows. I love the dynamics. I loved the callers that would call in with questions, and the host that would give advice. I love that stuff. But I do realize that a lot of podcasters, or a lot of people who are calling themselves podcasters, are doing this whole video style, Zoom, talking head style, StreamYard, whatever it could be, video style of a show. And I respect that and I get that. But I think where those really, really shine is in short form clips. I'm talking the TikTok, Instagram Reels, YouTube, whatever, the YouTube Shorts, whatever it is, like the 2-minute clips of the interview. That is where those really, really shine. If you're going to use anything with video for your podcast, if you want to do a whole video recording, fine. But I would take the long form audio content, which really is designed for long form in the first place, take that and use it for your audio podcast. Find the amazing clips from the amazing content from the amazing interview and slice those up and use those for TikTok, Instagram, all those short form video clips. Use them for that. That is where those things really, really shine. People's attention span is quite short, I would say. And especially if you're on YouTube and you're watching a podcast where two hosts are just talking on the video camera, they're just talking back and forth to each other on the cameras and stuff, not really showing you much. You're not really not doing much on the screen other than just talking. Maybe they'll show an image on screen once in a while, but not physically doing anything. Then I can't imagine sitting there for an entire hour watching that stuff. You can easily splice that into like 5 to 10 different little segments of the best stuff, and each one of those can live as its own unique thing. So that's my advice when it comes to podcast video, if you're going to create video and actually share it with the world. So here we are to the moment you've all been waiting for. What is that one simple thing that we all can do for each of our podcasts that will make your podcast and my podcast and anybody's podcast be amazing? Go from good to amazing. How do you do that? Well, there's one thing we all should share in our podcast, and that is engaging content that you cannot get anywhere else. Okay, I know you're thinking, how do I do that when pretty much every single thing has been covered, everything's been talked about? If you're going back to the movie review shows, yes, of course, you think you're the only show that's reviewing that movie that week. So that is definitely not content you can't get anywhere else. In fact, talking about a movie or watching the movie or movie reviews, for example, gosh, there's so much movie reviews out there on the internet. There's about 1 million different movie reviewers that go to the theater when the show opens and they write their column about the movie. That is definitely content you can get anywhere. You know what I'm saying? What I mean by podcast content that you cannot get anywhere else. How do you put that onto your podcast? Well, it's very, very simple. The one thing that makes your podcast special, one thing that makes your podcast different than my podcast and different than the next guy's podcast, you know what that is? It's you. You are the thing that makes your podcast great. Stories and experiences that you have had are different than the experiences that I have had. Let me give you an example. So, a few years ago, Christine and I took a trip to Hawaii, which is kind of fun. We're going to go in a few months over there with the whole family. The first time the kids have ever been to Hawaii. We're heading on over there. Whole family vacation. We take a big family vacation every year. Last year, we went to Miami and to Disney World. This year, we're going to go over to Hawaii. And so Christine and I went over there a few years ago, and we rented a Jeep, because I've always wanted to rent a Jeep in Hawaii. It's a kind of thing you can do. Convertible style. You take the roof off. You got the windows down. You feel like you're in a convertible mode. Cruise around the island in this Jeep. And if you've never been to the island of Hawaii, there are roads. Yes, there are even freeways. They're not very fast. You can't go very fast on these freeways because, one, they're kind of narrow. And two, There's actually a lot of traffic on the island. You wouldn't think about it, but I mean, everybody is living on this island, which isn't very big miles wise. And so the roads get crowded and they get congested. So we're driving through the country, coming back to our resort from the other side of the island. We're over there doing some sightseeing and we're cruising by. We're on this country road, stuck in traffic. It was bumper to bumper. As I look up ahead, I see a guy with a flatbed like trailer thing and like a truck pulling it. And he was on the side of the road with a big sign holding in the air. I could see it. It said, fresh fruit smoothies. And I'm like, it was hot, of course. And I'm like, gosh, we can either sit in traffic and wait to get back to our room, or I'm like, you know what? I'm pulling over and I'm going to go check this thing out because I can't turn down a smoothie. You know what I'm saying? So we go over there and the guy was like slicing up fresh pineapples, cutting them out, coring them out, and making the actual smoothies into the actual pineapple itself. So the pineapple is becoming the cup. I mean, very classic with I think it had an umbrella in there and the whole 9 yards. So I had to have a pineapple smoothie. Christine had like a berry mix smoothie. And as we're waiting in line to get our smoothies from this guy who's doing the whole thing, fresh pineapples, the whole fresh everything, other cars started parking and waiting in line with us to try out the smoothie thing. And so as we're waiting in line, we're talking to the people behind us. They said, hey, what made you want to stop here and get the smoothie thing? And they said, for the experience. And it got me thinking, yeah, we can go get a smoothie at Jamba Juice or whatever. They're a dime a dozen. They're all over the place. But you go here to this guy on the side of the road who's cutting up pineapples and doing things fresh for the experience of it all. And it was very good. I can tell you that much. And I cannot wait to go back and try that again. If I can find the guy on the side of the road, I'll go back and find him because it's all about the experience. So when you have your podcast, your personal experiences will be different than somebody else's. That is content that you can't find anywhere else because it belongs only to you. It's your story. So whatever industry you're in or whatever experiences you have in life, feel free to share those on your podcast, but you got to make sure they kind of relate to the story or at least to the topic of whatever you're talking about on your show. My experience in Hawaii, no matter how simple it might have been, was something that happened to me and me only on that trip. Well, Christine was there, but you get the point. So it's content that I just shared with you that you didn't get from anywhere else. I know I'm oversimplifying it, but it's basically the concept I'm trying to get to you is that your personal stories and your personal life experiences, no matter what they are special. And you can feel free to share them or not share them. It's really up to you. You can podcast about anything you want to podcast. It's, sky's the limit. Podcast about your cat. I don't care. But at the end of every single episode, you want to think, did this deliver value to my listener? And did my listener get content that he probably cannot get anywhere else he listens to a podcast? Make it unique. Make it yours. And that is the difference between a subpar podcast to a great podcast. Great podcasts get involved, they get in your head, they make you think, and they deliver amazing value. Once again, I want to say thank you so much for being here on Podtastic Audio. If you have any questions or concerns, you always can email me, reach me on all my social medias. My website is podtasticaudio.com, and you keep on making your amazing podcast with your fantastic audio. And I'll catch you next time.